Hello, everyone. The communique from the fourth plenum can be faked, but policy cannot be faked. This round of U.S.-China trade negotiations and the Trump-Xi meeting held yesterday serve as an excellent observation window. The Trump-Xi meeting has concluded, and the main terms have been gradually disclosed. The result, as we see, remains a matter of divergent opinions. For instance, the reliably anti-Trump New York Times insists that Trump suffered a major defeat and Xi Jinping achieved a complete victory, while conversely, many others believe Xi fully capitulated and Trump walked away with overflowing gains. Of course, there are also plenty of views claiming both sides gained something, with Trump or Xi slightly edging out the other. So what exactly happened? This Trump-Xi meeting carried an enormous amount of information. We will first share with you the latest details, also the ones everyone cares about most, regarding the known negotiation terms, because I've noticed significant discrepancies in how different people describe the content of the terms, and the interpretive differences are naturally even greater. Then we will discuss several key pieces of information with you, such as the richly informative video footage from the moment Trump and Xi first met, the special signal embedded in the choice of meeting venue, and some sensitive yet intriguing scenes from the talks. Today is October 30th Eastern Time. I am Tang Jingyuan. Welcome to subscribe to our channel. You will not only know what happened, but also why it happened. To fully understand what kind of deal the US and China ultimately reached, and who came out ahead, we must compare the statement from both sides. Let's start with what the CCP side is saying. Today, the spokesperson of the CCP Ministry of Commerce officially released the Chinese version of a narrative, which mainly includes the following points. 1. The U.S. side will cancel the 10% fentanyl tariff imposed on Chinese goods, including goods from Hong Kong and Macau, while the 24% reciprocal tariff on Chinese goods, including Hong Kong and Macau goods, will continue to be suspended for 1 year. The Chinese side will accordingly adjust its countermeasures against the aforementioned U.S. tariffs. Both sides agree to continue extending certain tariff exclusion measures. 2. The U.S. side will suspend for 1 year the implementation of its September 29 announced 50% de minimis export control rule. The Chinese side will suspend for 1 year the implementation of its October 9 announced related export control measures and will study and refine specific plans. 3. The U.S. side will suspend for 1 year the implementation of its Section 301 investigation measures against China's maritime, logistics, and shipbuilding sectors. After the U.S. suspends the relevant measures, the Chinese side will accordingly suspend its countermeasures against the U.S. for 1 year. In addition, the two sides reached consensus on fentanyl anti-drug cooperation, expanding agricultural trade, handling specific enterprise cases, and other issues. The two sides further confirmed the outcomes of the Madrid economic and trade consultations. The U.S. side made positive commitments in areas such as investment, and the Chinese side will properly resolve TikTok-related issues with the U.S. side. At first glance, it appears the CCP came out ahead. The U.S. is the one canceling or suspending first, after which the Chinese side adjusts as appropriate, and then consensus or proper resolution is reached on focal issues like fentanyl. The U.S. side is very clear. The Chinese side is very vague. Now let's look at what the American side is saying. First, Trump himself was extremely satisfied with the meeting, calling it very successful, saying that almost everything discussed was agreed upon by both sides, that if the score were out of 10, he would give it 12, and that many matters were finally finalized. Second, the outcomes on the three major focal points. The most important, rare earths. The CCP confirmed it would postpone rare earth controls for 1 year, and Trade Representative Greer specifically added that the Chinese side will no longer implement the rare earth control policies it had previously designated. Second, soybeans and other agricultural products. The Chinese side agreed to immediately begin purchasing soybeans and other agricultural products. Besant revealed a specific figure today. The CCP committed to importing 25 million tons of U.S. soybeans annually for the next 3 years. Moreover, U.S. Agriculture Secretary Rollins confirmed that China will cancel unreasonable tariffs imposed on most U.S. agricultural products. Third, Xi Jinping agreed to work very hard to stop the export of fentanyl precursors and to ensure the U.S. side sees real action. Based on Xi's attitude, Trump chose to believe his sincerity. The U.S. side will reduce the 10% fentanyl tariff, thereby lowering the total U.S. tariff on China from 57% to 47%. This should include the average 27% tariff from Trump's previous term, plus the 10% fentanyl tariff added in the current term, and the 10% baseline tariff applied to all countries. The fourth part concerns U.S. export controls, which everyone is very concerned about. Trump confirmed agreement for the Chinese side to begin negotiations with NVIDIA on importing chips, but Trump said this does not include the latest Blackwell chips. These chips were not mentioned at all by either side. Beyond that, the U.S. also agreed to suspend for 1 year the plan, originally set for September, to impose export restrictions on subsidiaries of certain entities already on the entity list. Then there is the synchronous 1-year suspension by both the U.S. and China of port fees on each other's vessels. Overall, the U.S. used a 10% tariff reduction, plus a 1-year suspension of export restrictions on certain Chinese companies on the entity list. The U.S. suspension of the 50% de minimis rule for 1 year refers to this, and a hugely ambiguous low-spec chip export, in exchange for the CCP abandoning rare earth controls, massively purchasing U.S. soybeans, genuinely delivering on fentanyl controls, agreeing to sell TikTok, and the CCP tacitly accepting the 20% tariff Trump imposed after taking office, this time without further retaliation. Moreover, the CCP made low-key but potentially very significant concessions on 2 major geopolitical issues. One is Xi Jinping's promise to help resolve the Ukraine issue, while China agreed to begin purchasing U.S. energy, with a large-scale deal to purchase oil and natural gas from Alaska possibly imminent. The other is that Trump and Xi did not mention Taiwan at all. Why do I say these are important and potentially realizable concessions? Because if the CCP begins purchasing large quantities of U.S. oil and gas, it necessarily means a decline in purchases of Russian oil. Of course, reaching the point Trump mentioned of completely stopping purchases is unrealistic, but even reducing a certain share of purchases would be enough to pressure Putin. And the Taiwan issue is an extremely sensitive core issue for the CCP. In the past, the CCP has repeatedly stated forcefully that it would tie U.S.-China trade agreements to the Taiwan issue, which is why she probed whether Trump could adjust his stance from not supporting Taiwan independence to opposing Taiwan independence. If we count these as 2 major concessions, Trump effectively used a 10% tariff and 1 control list, plus possibly provided low-spec chips, to obtain substantive concessions from the CCP in 5 major economic and trade sectors, and flexible concessions in 2 geopolitical sectors. And we haven't even factored in the major strategic move of the U.S. resuming nuclear weapons testing. Who got the better deal? Who won? I think the answer is extremely clear. The United States achieved an overwhelming victory. Xi Jinping fully capitulated, and CCP foreign policy executed a hairpin-turn super reversal. The most symbolic elements here are the abandonment of the rare earth card and the Taiwan card. These 2 cards are the ones that most embody the CCP's wolf warrior line at its most hardline, especially the Taiwan issue. Since the Obama-Clinton era, the CCP has been trying to use economic concessions as bargaining chips to obtain U.S. acquiescence to a CCP invasion of Taiwan. This is one of the core strategies the CCP regards as using economic leverage to shift the political map, but this time it was casually and cheerfully abandoned without a peep. Before this Trump-Xi meeting, the outside world generally believed the 2 sides would need to talk for at least 3 to 4 hours. Many liberal media outlets even hyped that she would be very tough and Trump would face difficult talks, etc. The result? The entire Trump-Xi meeting lasted less than 1 hour 40 minutes. If we subtract the opening remarks, interpretation time, etc., the actual substantive discussion between the 2 sides is estimated at only about 45 minutes. Nearly 10 major issues, averaging only 4 to 5 minutes per issue. This surprised everyone. What does this indicate? It indicates that she basically accepted everything as presented. Forget about back-and-forth disputes over differences. Even routine bargaining may have been minimal. You propose something, I say a few polite words, then nod in agreement. That was basically the state of affairs. In other words, the Trump-Xi meeting went too smoothly, so smoothly that many people began to doubt its authenticity, which is why Trump was overjoyed and gave it a 12 out of 10. Of course, many friends will question that the CCP has capitulated multiple times in the past, but never honored agreements. That is true, but 2 points about this agreement are worth noting. 1. This is a one-year agreement that must be renewed at the end of each year. In other words, both sides will review actual implementation over the year. If the other side fails to deliver, the trade war will rapidly reignite. 2. Will the CCP honor its commitments? I don't think this is absolute. In the past, the CCP never honored agreements when it held the upper hand, but when facing an existential crisis, it would comply. For the United States, this trade negotiation may be just the most important among many agreements, but for the CCP, it is a matter of life and death. If talks collapse, the US and China will truly decouple, and China will be excluded from the new international trade system. Between the wolf warrior faction's accompany to the end and the reform faction's gorgeous capitulation, the CCP chose the latter. Trump, answering reporters on Air Force One yesterday, spoke about the fentanyl issue. His exact words were, "We have already seen their actions on fentanyl, very strong. So we lowered it by 10 percentage points." Why did she suddenly capitulate? Some might say, what's surprising about that? Hasn't she flipped pancakes before, just like with zero COVID lockdowns, where he capitulated overnight? True, she has a history of flipping, but that was always after suffering a major crisis. Without the white paper revolution erupting nationwide, she would never have ordered the lifting of lockdowns and the pivot. If we follow the narrative that the fourth plenum was Xi himself purging 9 generals and his power became even more secure, she should logically have shown a tougher stance in U.S.-China negotiations. Why does the objective reality we see run completely counter to that? Speaking of Xi's performance, we must now discuss that somewhat strange video of his initial meeting with Trump. This 1-minute video clearly shows Xi in very poor mental condition, visibly low-spirited. Trump made small talk. Xi actually said only 2 sentences, "Very glad to meet again," and "Me too," totaling just 14 characters including interjections. Throughout the photo op small talk segment, she was completely like a puppet, expression dull and rigid, forming a stark contrast with Trump's proactive enthusiasm. One could even see Xi's eyes somewhat timid and shrinking, seemingly deliberately avoiding eye contact with Trump. When Trump used a body gesture indicating control of the situation, patting Xi on the back, she even appeared a bit ill at ease and restless, showing not a trace of the for confidences. There's an old Chinese saying, "The face reflects the heart." Xi's face was full of weary despondency, and he barely spoke, something many Westerners noticed and found abnormal. Many asked what had happened, and quite a few thought she seemed impatient. But if we look at the negotiation outcome now, we know Xi's mood could not possibly be good, because this agreement is an out-and-out treaty under the city walls. If Xi has already been sidelined and was forced to come play an upgraded version of Li Hongzhang, he would of course be extremely uncomfortable. If he still holds full power, yet has to kneel and capitulate, he would of course be even more uncomfortable. This discomfort was so obvious that when CCTV released this video, it clipped only the first 3 seconds. After the formal Trump-Xi meeting began, each side dispatched 6 accompanying personnel. The live footage showed that at the long negotiating table, Trump had no documents in front of him. He spoke freely and off the cuff, while in front of Xi were placed 2 A4 sheets with content suspected to be negotiation points written in oversized font. Xi kept his head down reading these 2 script pages, occasionally looking up at Trump. Across the table, President Trump kept swinging his head left and right, appearing rather impatient and fully displaying dominant status. 2 noteworthy details merit mention. First, 45 minutes before the Trump-Xi meeting was to take place, Trump suddenly announced that the United States would resume nuclear weapons testing. This action was, of course, no coincidence, but a pressure tactic before the meeting. In stark contrast, during Xi's remarks, he actually praised Trump lavishly for his contributions to international peace, including the Gaza ceasefire, the Cambodia-Thailand ceasefire, and so on. 45 minutes was plenty of time for Xi to revise his speaking notes. Given such a major hardline signal from Trump, under Xi's wolf warrior tradition, failing to respond in his remarks would be almost impossible. The second detail is the location of the Trump-Xi meeting. I saw many friends notice that after the meeting ended, there was no press conference and no joint statement. As soon as Trump and Xi left the venue, Trump boarded his plane. Because this meeting took place inside the airport, a military building in South Korea's Gimhae Air Base in Busan. During the Korean War, this base was a major U.S. heavy transport hub. Although the base is now maintained by the South Korean Air Force, U.S. forces in Korea can still use part of its facilities, so the U.S. military counts as half the host. Busan has plenty of high-end hotels. Casually picking one as the venue for the Trump-Xi meeting will be far more formal and upscale than this base conference room. Holding talks at the base was clearly proposed by the U.S. side, because for Trump, first, it was extremely convenient. Finish talking, walk out, and board the plane. Second, it gave him an intangible home field advantage. We saw during the Trump-Xi greeting and photo segment that Trump deliberately stood in position a few seconds early, waiting for Xi to walk over, a clear host-receiving guest posture. The CCP is an organization that obsesses over no small matter in diplomacy. I find it strange that Xi, who has always been overbearing, face-obsessed, and determined to appear strong, actually agreed to an arrangement that so obviously let the U.S. side gain the upper hand. Why do I say Trump was graciously granting Xi a meeting? Some may think I'm exaggerating or overinterpreting, but Trump was unwilling to wait an extra hour for Xi in Gyeongju, a 1-hour drive from Busan to Gyeongju, and unwilling to arrange a high-end hotel in Busan for a more formal meeting. Objectively speaking, he didn't really take the Trump-Xi meeting all that seriously. Even South Korean media noticed this and published articles stating that this was the first time in history a CCP leader held a summit at a foreign military base overseas. The U.S. side proposing such an arrangement carried an obvious message. I can meet you, but my time is tight, so if you want to meet, hurry over to the airport. I'll chat with you at the airport, and when we're done, I'll board the plane. But was Trump really that pressed for time? Whether his plane took off 2 hours early or 2 hours late, I don't see the difference. This can only mean the concept that you're seeking me, not I seeking you.